Delivering pizza to Nexus, I found chaos everywhere. The CEO shouted desperately, "We're losing everything. If we don't fix this in minutes, billions will disappear," as hackers destroyed his company. I set down the pizza and said, "I can help." The entire office erupted in laughter. One programmer sneered, "Sure, the pizza girl's gonna save Nexus." Another chimed in mockingly, "What's next? Are you going to fix our quarterly reports too?" But I wasn't fazed. You see, what they didn't know was that I'd been Ghost Key for 3 years, one of the most sought-after cybersecurity consultants in the Pacific Northwest. My pizza delivery job was just cover while I built my client base. I'd already saved 2 Fortune 500 companies from similar attacks, charging $50,000 per incident. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was about to save a third company for free, just because their CEO looked desperate enough to actually listen. William Johnson, the CEO, studied my face for a moment. His company was hemorrhaging money by the second. Their banking systems compromised, client data being extracted, stock prices plummeting in real time. He had nothing left to lose. "If you can fix this," he said desperately, "I'll pay you $200,000. I smiled and pushed past the lead programmer to his workstation. "That would change my life, sir." What happened next was why I charged what I charged. My fingers flew across the keyboard, reading their code structure like a familiar language. Within 30 seconds, I'd identified the attack vector, a sophisticated multi-layer breach exploiting a vulnerability in their authentication system that their entire IT department had missed. "I need 2 more computers," I called out. Now employees were scrambling to help me instead of laughing. I opened 3 command windows simultaneously, building firewalls while tracing the hackers' digital footprints. The room fell silent except for the rapid clicking of keys. The hackers were good, better than most I'd faced. They'd layered their attack through 7 proxy servers and were using military-grade encryption. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated their target, just like everyone always underestimated me. "Close that security port," I shouted to one programmer. "Reroute traffic through the backup server." They obeyed without question now, watching in amazement as screens began returning to normal. Then the hackers adapted. A new wave of malicious code flooded the system, more aggressive than before. The lights flickered, servers beeped frantically. William sank into his chair, certain this was the end of his billion-dollar company. "Shut up and let me work," I snapped when he started panicking. I stopped playing defense and went on full attack. Using techniques I'd learned from consulting for defense contractors, I traced their location while simultaneously building mirror attacks to overwhelm their systems. For every wall they put up, I found 3 ways around it. 15 minutes later, every screen glowed green. The attack was not only stopped, I'd locked the hackers out of their own systems and traced them to an underground operation in Eastern Europe. The office erupted in cheers. William stared at me like I just performed a miracle, which in his world, I basically had. He opened his leather portfolio with shaking hands and wrote a check for exactly $200,000. "You just saved billions," he said, handing it over. I took the check, adjusted my pizza delivery bag, and replied with my usual humor. "Mr. Johnson, this is definitely the most expensive tip in pizza delivery history." As I walked toward the elevator, I heard him tell his assistant, "Find out everything you can about her. I have a feeling we'll need her again." He had no idea how right he was. 3 weeks later, I stood in front of a small brick building in Portland's Pearl District, keys trembling in my hand. The $200,000 check had cleared, and I'd just signed a lease on my dream, a small cafe space that would become Sweet Ivy. But more importantly, I'd also used $30,000 of that money to incorporate Ivy Cooper Cybersecurity Solutions, complete with a business license, professional liability insurance, and a registered office address. The transformation of the space took 2 weeks. I painted the walls sage green, installed vintage Edison bulb fixtures, and created a display case for pastries that looked like something from a magazine. But in the back office, hidden behind a bookshelf, I set up my real operation: 3 high-end computers, multiple monitors, and enough networking equipment to run a small tech company. Sweet Ivy opened on a Tuesday morning in October. By afternoon, I had my first regular customer. Mr. Bradley, a retired accountant who tried to pay for his coffee with exact change while pretending to forget his wallet. "Mr. Bradley, that's the 3rd time this week you've forgotten your wallet," I said, arms crossed but smiling. "Either your memory's going or you think I was born yesterday." He chuckled, somehow finding exact change in his jacket pocket. "You remind me of my daughter, too smart for her own good." What Mr. Bradley didn't know was that I'd already run a background check on every customer who'd visited in the first week. Old habits from my cybersecurity work. He was exactly who he appeared to be, a lonely widower with a healthy pension who enjoyed harmless mischief. By month's end, Sweet Ivy had become the neighborhood's unofficial community center. Young professionals worked on laptops while sipping my signature vanilla lattes. Mothers brought toddlers for afternoon treats. Couples claimed the window table for quiet conversations. And every evening after closing, I'd flip the sign, lock the door, and transform back into Ghost Key. I'd built a client base of mid-sized companies who needed discreet cybersecurity consulting. Nothing as dramatic as the Tech Nexus situation, but steady work that paid $15,000 to $25,000 per project. Then on a sunny Thursday afternoon, everything changed again. I was arranging fresh scones in the display case when the bell chimed. I looked up to see William Johnson standing in my doorway wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit and looking around my cafe with genuine curiosity. "So, this is what you did with the money," he said, his voice carrying that same intensity I remembered from our first meeting. My heart started racing, but I kept my expression neutral. "I figured investing in sugar and flour was safer than saving desperate billionaires full-time." He laughed, a rich sound that made several customers glance our way. "Smart strategy. Mind if I try whatever's making that incredible smell?" I cut him a slice of my signature lemon pound cake and poured coffee into one of my handmade ceramic mugs. He found a table by the window, and I watched from behind the counter as he ate slowly, savoring each bite. Something about seeing this powerful CEO relaxing in my small cafe felt surreal. When he finished, he left a $50 bill on the table. I followed him to the door. "The slice was $4.50, I said, holding out his change. "Consider it an investment in local business," he replied, then paused. "Also, I wanted to personally thank you again. What you did that night." He shook his head. "My entire board of directors calls it the miracle save. You're something of a legend at Tech Nexus now." Before I could respond, he was gone, leaving me standing in the doorway with $45 and a strange mix of pride and anxiety. He came back the next week, same time, same order, same generous tip, then the week after that. By the 4th visit, my other customers had started making comments. "That businessman likes you," whispered Mrs. Patterson, an elderly regular who came in every morning for green tea and a blueberry muffin. "He's just a customer," I replied, but my face felt warm. "Honey," Mrs. Patterson said with a knowing smile, "I've been married for 52 years. I know what interested looks like." The pattern continued for 3 more weeks. William would arrive around 3 p.m. when the afternoon crowd thinned out, order black coffee and whatever dessert caught his eye, and sit at the same corner table for exactly 40 minutes. Sometimes he worked on his laptop. Sometimes he just watched the neighborhood through the window. I found myself looking forward to his visits, which complicated everything. I'd built a carefully structured life, cafe owner by day, cybersecurity consultant by night. William Johnson represented the kind of attention that could disrupt both identities. But on a Friday afternoon in November, disruption found me anyway. William walked in looking troubled. His usual composed demeanor cracked around the edges. Instead of ordering, he approached the counter directly. "Ivy, I need to talk to you about something important." I glanced around the cafe. Only 2 other customers, both absorbed in their laptops. "What's wrong?" "The attacks are back," he said quietly. "Not like before. Smaller, more targeted. Someone's been probing our systems for weeks. My IT department says they're handling it, but..." He ran a hand through his hair. "Something feels different this time." A chill ran down my spine. "Different how?" "They know our defenses. Every countermeasure we've implemented since your save, they've found ways around. It's like they're studying us." I set down the dish towel I'd been holding. "What do you want from me?" "I know you said that night was a one-time thing, but you're the only person who truly understood their methods. Would you consider consulting for us? Officially this time. Full rate, whatever you normally charge." I almost laughed. If only he knew that my normal rate for corporate cybersecurity was exactly what he'd paid me that first night. Instead, I considered the offer carefully. Taking on Tech Nexus as a formal client would mean steady income, enough to expand the cafe, maybe even hire an evening manager so I could focus more on the consulting business. "I charge $300 an hour for cybersecurity consultation," I said. "Minimum 20-hour retainer up front." "Done." He pulled out his phone. "I can transfer $6,000 right now." "Slow down, billionaire. Let me think about it." But before I could think, the lights went out. Complete darkness fell over Sweet Ivy. Through the front window, I could see that every other business on the block still had power. This wasn't a grid failure. This was targeted. "Stay calm, everyone," I called out, pulling out my phone's flashlight. "Just a technical issue." William was already on his feet, his own phone casting shadows across his tense face. This can't be a coincidence. I made my way to the back office, William following close behind. The main electrical panel was in a locked closet near my desk. When I opened it, my blood ran cold. Every circuit breaker had been manually switched off. "Someone was in my building," I whispered. That's when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have gotten involved. Stay away or next time will be worse." I showed William the message. His expression darkened. "They know you helped me," he said. "Now you're a target too." I flipped the breakers back on and the lights returned. My customers clapped, relieved, joking about power grids and old buildings. But I knew the truth. Someone had been watching me, had access to my building, had escalated from digital threats to physical intimidation. After the last customer left that night, I sat across from William at one of my cafe tables, both of us drinking coffee that had gone cold hours ago. "I'm sorry," he said. "I never meant to drag you into something dangerous." "Too late for apologies. They already found me." I took a breath. "So what do you want me to do?" "Help me find out who's behind this, please." I looked around my cafe. The dream I'd built with his $200,000 check, now threatened by his enemies. The rational choice was to walk away, to refuse his consulting offer and hope they'd leave me alone. But I'd never been good at making rational choices. "All right," I said. "I'll help. But on my terms, at my rate, and with full access to your systems. If I'm going to be a target anyway, I might as well be a well-paid target." Over the next 2 weeks, I divided my time between running Sweet Ivy and diving deep into Tech Nexus's digital infrastructure. I set up a secure workstation in my cafe's back office, using military-grade encryption to analyze their systems remotely. What I found disturbed me. The new attacks weren't random. Someone with intimate knowledge of Tech Nexus's architecture was conducting systematic reconnaissance, probing specific vulnerabilities that only an insider would know to target. The attack patterns showed familiarity with the exact security protocols I'd helped implement after the first breach. More troubling, the digital signatures suggested this wasn't the same group from the original attack. This was someone new, someone closer, someone with authorized access to systems they were supposedly protecting. I spent 3 nights building a comprehensive analysis, cross-referencing access logs, behavioral patterns, and system modifications. When I finished, I had a list of 12 Tech Nexus employees who had the knowledge and access necessary to orchestrate this kind of inside threat. I called William at 6 a.m. on a Wednesday. "We need to meet," I said. "Not at my cafe, not at your office, somewhere private." An hour later, we sat in his Mercedes in the parking lot of Forest Grove, a small park outside the city where morning joggers provided natural camouflage for our conversation. "It's an inside job," I told him directly. "Someone with administrator access to your core systems has been feeding information to external hackers." William's knuckles went white where he gripped the steering wheel. "Are you certain?" "I've traced 17 separate instances of data extraction over the past month, all during business hours, all using legitimate credentials, all targeting the specific systems that would be most valuable to competitors or extortionists." I handed him a printed analysis, 12 pages of evidence that had taken me 40 hours to compile. "The access patterns point to someone in your senior staff," I continued, "someone who knows your security protocols intimately because they helped design them." William studied the documents, his expression growing darker with each page. "Give me names." 3 possibilities stand out. Gregory Foster, your VP of Operations, Rebecca Hayes, your Chief Information Officer, and Daniel Brooks, your Head of Corporate Security. He closed the folder and stared out at the park where families were setting up for morning picnics. "Greg's been with me for 8 years. Rebecca built our entire IT infrastructure from scratch. And Daniel," he shook his head, "Daniel's the one who recommended we hire external security consultants in the first place." "One of them is betraying you," I said gently. "The data doesn't lie." "What do you need to prove which one?" "Full access to their personal devices, work computers, and email histories, plus permission to install monitoring software on anything they touch." William was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Done. Whatever you need." "This gets complicated now. If we're wrong about which one, or if they realize they're being watched, they'll either destroy evidence or accelerate whatever they're planning. And if we're right, then we stop them before they can do permanent damage to your company." What I didn't tell William was that I'd already started monitoring all 3 suspects using techniques that existed in legal gray areas. Over the past week, I'd traced their digital footprints, analyzed their financial records, and built behavioral profiles that painted a disturbing picture. Gregory Foster was drowning in gambling debts, $340,000 owed to offshore betting sites that specialized in cryptocurrency transactions. Rebecca Hayes had been selling proprietary code snippets to competitors, generating an extra $25,000 per month in unreported income. And Daniel Brooks had been systematically copying security protocols to an encrypted drive that connected to servers in Eastern Europe. Any one of them had motive and opportunity. All 3 had means, but one of them had recently made a mistake that would expose everything. The breakthrough came on Thursday night while I was closing the cafe. I'd been running continuous monitoring on all 3 suspects, and Daniel Brooks's computer had just connected to a server I'd been tracking for weeks, the same server that had hosted the command infrastructure for the original attack on Tech Nexus. I called William immediately. "It's Daniel," I said without preamble. "I have proof." "What kind of proof?" "The kind that will hold up in court and get him 20 years for corporate espionage." 2 hours later, William and I sat in the conference room at his law firm across from Margaret Stone, a former federal prosecutor who now specialized in corporate cybercrimes. I'd worked with her before on 2 previous cases, and she understood both the technical aspects and legal implications of what we discovered. "This is comprehensive," she said, reviewing my evidence file. "Financial records showing payments from competitors, encrypted communications with known hackers, and clear documentation of data theft. How did you obtain all this? Through legally authorized monitoring of company systems, I replied carefully. Everything was accessed with proper corporate permissions. Margaret smiled knowingly. She understood that cybersecurity work often required creative interpretation of legal boundaries. The strongest evidence is the real-time connection logs, she continued. If you can document him actively transmitting proprietary data to external servers, that's a federal crime with mandatory minimum sentencing. We can do better than that, I said. We can catch him in the act. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. William would announce a fake merger negotiation with a West Coast tech company, complete with fabricated financial projections and timeline details. The information would be classified at the highest level, accessible only to senior staff, including Daniel Brooks. I would monitor all network traffic from Daniel's devices. When he inevitably copied and transmitted the fake merger details, we'd have real-time documentation of corporate espionage. How long do you think it will take? William asked. Based on his previous patterns, probably 48 hours. He typically waits 2 days after accessing new information before making his encrypted transfers. Margaret nodded approvingly. That gives us time to coordinate with federal authorities. They'll want to be positioned to make arrests the moment we document active transmission. What about the external hackers he's been feeding information to? The FBI has been tracking that server network for months, Margaret explained. Your evidence gives them grounds for coordinated raids across 3 countries. Friday morning, William sent the fake merger announcement to his senior staff via encrypted email. By noon, Daniel Brooks had accessed the file 7 times and made 3 copies to removable storage devices. I spent that weekend in my cafe's back office, monitoring network traffic with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Every few hours, William would text for updates, and I'd send back technical readouts that showed Daniel's continued access to the fabricated merger details. Sunday evening at my monitoring systems triggered an alert. Daniel Brooks's home computer had just initiated an encrypted connection to the Eastern European server network. I called William and Margaret simultaneously on a conference line. He's transmitting now, I reported, watching data packets flow across my screen in real time. Uploading the complete fake merger file plus 17 other proprietary documents. Federal agents are moving to his location, Margaret confirmed. Keep monitoring until transmission is complete. For 23 minutes, I watched Daniel Brooks commit federal crimes in real time. Each data packet meticulously logged and timestamped. When the transfer finished, my monitoring software had documented the transmission of 847 MB of proprietary corporate data to servers controlled by an international cybercrime syndicate. Margaret called back. Daniel Brooks is in federal custody. The coordinated raids in Europe were successful. They've arrested 12 members of the hacker network and seized their servers. I sank back in my office chair, suddenly exhausted. 3 weeks of 18-hour days had culminated in 23 minutes of decisive action. It's over? William asked. It's over, I confirmed. Monday morning brought a strange normalcy to Sweet Ivy. I served coffee and pastries to my regular customers, listened to Mr. Bradley's daily attempts to avoid paying for his muffin, and basked in the surreal pleasure of problems that could be solved with good customer service rather than federal law enforcement. William arrived at his usual time, but instead of his typical order, he approached the counter with an envelope. Your consulting fee, he said, sliding it across to me. Inside was a check for $47,000. Payment for the 157 hours I'd logged on his case at my stated rate of $300 per hour. This is too much, I protested. Actually, it's not enough. You saved my company twice now, exposed a conspiracy that could have destroyed us, and helped federal authorities dismantle an international cyber crime network. He paused. I'd like to offer you something more permanent. I raised an eyebrow. Such as? Chief Security Consultant for Tech Nexus, $200,000 annual retainer plus project fees. You could keep the cafe, Work your own schedule, handle only the cases that interest you. It was everything I dreamed of when I started my consulting business: financial security, professional respect, and the flexibility to maintain my double life as cafe owner and cybersecurity expert. "I'll need to think about it," I said, though my heart was already racing with excitement. "Take all the time you need. The offer stands." That evening, after closing Sweet Ivy, I sat at my favorite corner table with a cup of coffee and William's offer letter. The cafe felt different somehow, less like a hiding place, more like a foundation for something bigger. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Saw the news about Tech Nexus arrests. Impressive work, Ghost Key. We should meet." Below the message was a logo I recognized: Fitzgerald and Associates, the most prestigious cybersecurity firm on the West Coast. They'd been trying to recruit Ghost Key for over a year, never knowing that their target was a small cafe owner in Portland. I smiled and deleted the message. Some secrets were worth keeping. 6 months later, Sweet Ivy had expanded into the adjacent storefront, adding a bookshop section and hosting weekend events for local artists and writers. My partnership with Tech Nexus had generated 3 more major cases, each one adding to both my reputation and my bank account. William had become something more than a client, though we were both too professional to acknowledge it directly. He still visited the cafe regularly, now bringing other Tech Nexus executives who'd heard about the brilliant security consultant who also makes the best coffee in Portland. Mr. Bradley still tried to avoid paying for his daily muffin, but now he also brought me newspaper clippings about cybersecurity cases, convinced that as a cafe owner I'd find them fascinating. "Look at this, Ivy," he said one morning, showing me an article about the Daniel Brooks trial. "Corporate espionage, international conspiracies. Makes you grateful for simple pleasures, doesn't it?" "It certainly does, Mr. Bradley," I replied, accepting exact change for his coffee. "It certainly does." As he settled into his usual corner table, I returned to inventorying pastries and planning my afternoon's agenda. At 3 p.m., William would arrive for his standing consultation meeting. At 5 p.m., I'd close the cafe and transform my back office into Ghost Key's command center. At 7 p.m., I'd start analyzing network traffic for 3 different corporate clients who paid handsomely for my expertise. It was a complex life, but it was mine. Built on my own terms, powered by skills I'd earned, and protected by relationships I'd chosen carefully. From pizza delivery to cybersecurity legend to cafe owner to corporate consultant, each identity had taught me something valuable about who I wanted to become. And for the first time in my life, all of those identities finally felt like different facets of the same person. Someone who'd learned that the best revenge against people who underestimate you is simply becoming too successful to ignore.